Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life and Style with Zara on Dash Radio and Ruckus Avenue. I'm your host, Zara Durrani. On this episode, I'm so excited to welcome #1 New York Times bestselling author, one of my favorite authors. I've carried her books with me from Vancouver to Paris, as well as on my travels. The book that I have with me right now is E Squared, but on audiobooks, I have Think and Grow Rich and E Cube, and Pam has also written over 20 books. I thought it was 16. I was checking out your website and it's 20 books in total. She's a TED speaker and she's also written for CNN, National Geographic, Men's Journal, and many more publications. Thank you so much for joining us, Pam.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. I have a list of questions here, but I want to tell you I am so excited to have you join us today. Your book, E Squared, was first gifted to me on my birthday, I would say about 4 years ago by a friend of mine. And I highlighted and underlined and I carried it with me to work all the time. So just want to tell you I've read your books many times. And I thought this is the very first episode of our podcast. And what a great way to start with someone who is filled with so much positive and infectious energy, and especially with everything going on in the world right now. It would be great to have a conversation with you in terms of how our listeners and viewers can shift their thinking from, the fear-based news or everything that is going on and uplift their energy. So I'd love to dig right in and see what tips we can get from you today.
Okay. So you want me to talk about staying positive in this difficult time?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, like everything, we draw into our lives whatever we put our attention upon. So even in times of difficulty and times of change, which is what we're having right now, we can still find things to put our attention on that are more positive. I mean, like, for example, it's spring where I live now. And every morning, there's new flowers coming up. There's birds singing their hearts out. There's always something to be grateful for. And one of the big focuses of my work is trying to change the paradigm. And I think a lot of people tend to live in what I call problem state. And, there's certainly plenty of things you can focus on. I think that's the paradigm. Find something that's broken and try to fix it. And now, of course, there's many things that appear to be broken and that maybe need to be fixed. But we also can focus on possibility state. And that's what I really encourage people to do, because there's always lots of possibilities. Like, even in this time, I feel like a lot of change is coming and a lot of things are going to be completely different than they were. And everybody's like, I want to go back to normal. But, normal is only one idea. And if you think about possibility, I think all kinds of new and exciting things are coming in. If you look at it from possibility state, you realize this is just a really incredible time. Everything's kind of flipped over. So any new thing could be possible. So that it really all depends on where you put your focus. And at any time, no matter what is happening, always we can put our focus on beautiful things, because there's always something beautiful to focus on.
Especially like the piece of art behind you. And that is, I know, the focus of your books, but I really wanted to address that because there seems to be, this blanket of energy. I've even totally stopped watching the news, and that's something that I'm doing for myself right now. Now, I want to know, how long did it take you? Of course, you've written many more books since E Squared, but how long did it take you to write this book? And were there many more experiments? Like, what I find really fascinating when reading this book, it's really funny. It didn't seem so woo-woo. I used to be a yoga teacher, so I used to be very woo-woo. They were matter of fact, experiments. And it says here 9 do-it-yourself energy experiments that prove your thoughts create your reality. And, were there more experiments than this when you were writing this book? And how long did it take you to put this together?
Well, that book has a pretty interesting backstory. It came out about maybe 10 years before it became E Squared under a different title. And at that time, it had 10 experiments. And I was really excited about that book. It was called God Doesn't Have Bad Hair Days. And I loved that book, and the 10 people that read it loved that book. You know, it never really took off. It just didn't do what, in fact, it came out about the same time as The Secret. Do you remember that movie, The Secret? Before the book, even, it was just that movie, The Secret. And my editor would call me up. This is God Doesn't Have Bad Hair. She goes, I don't understand it. This book is just like The Secret. Why is nobody reading it? And I have a couple different answers on that. But, you know, I had read it. But what I did, and I talk about this quite a bit, rather than be upset, I mean, here's this book I loved, I just went ahead and said, okay, that's what happened. And I ended up writing 3 books for National Geographic. I just put that book aside. And then about 7, 8 years later, it kind of called to me again. You know, I loved that book. It was really great. It had practical ways, you know, scientific experiments to prove these theories that we all read about and have known about for a long time. So I decided that maybe the title could be different. You know, there are several things I could change, but I still believed in that book. But again, I didn't, you know, woe is me when it, the first time it didn't come out. So I just repackaged it, basically changed the title, went from 10 experiments to 9 experiments, and sent it off to Hay House. And that's a publisher that specializes in these kind of books. And then it just took off like crazy. And one of the things I say, you were talking about gratitude. When this new book came out, when it came out as E Squared about 7, 8 years later, I had changed my vibratory, you know, what I was putting out. Everything had changed. I had gotten into a much more positive state. I was, I don't know, just optimistic. Even though that's what the book was about, I think I really was actively doing my AA 2.0 program. I was focusing on gratitude. I was in my life ready for this to happen, whereas maybe I wasn't ready for it to happen before. So anyway, you asked how long it took. The actual writing of the book, usually I write a book in less than a year. You know, I would say of my 20 books, I would say average, they would take about a year. But in some ways, this book, I had been working on it in a sense because I'd been doing these experiments myself and noticing they work, talking and sharing with other people. So it was the course of over maybe 10 years from when it came out, as you know, God Doesn't Have Bad Hair Days, until it came out. And then, you know, went on to be this huge international bestseller. It was like the difference of night and day between how these 2 books that are basically the same book. I mean, really, it is the same book that I just repackaged. So, I mean, that's even kind of a encouraging, optimistic tale for people that feel like, you know, they're just waiting for their big break. You know, it can happen. It just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it can't happen. And certainly with this book, you know, it went on to be published in 40 languages. You know, I've gone all over the world talking about this book. It just, I mean, huge, huge hit. And again, the first time it came out, it, you know, sold 8 copies and got remainder, you know, within a year. So, you know, anything's possible. So anyway, that's kind of sort of answers your question on how long it took for this book to be made.
One of my questions is, because I know you were writing, I was taking a look on your website for all these different publications and a lot about traveling. Now, inspirational and manifestation, and you know, these topics, did something occur in your life, or is this something that has been your interest for a very long time? Because I know you're also a student of A Course in Miracles, but was there like a shift in your life that you were like, okay, I'm going to start talking about this, or okay, I need to write about this?
Well, the nice thing about being a writer, and I've been a writer my entire life, you know, I was a journalist. I wrote for the Kansas City Star, you know, was a journalism major. And I think the nice thing about being a writer, I've always loved this about my career, whatever I was interested in, then I could pursue a story about it. I could get an interview with a person I was interested in, a topic, you know, I wanted to know more about, and gave me an excuse to write about it. So typically, you know, when I'm writing books, it's like, what am I most interested in? And I had been using these principles and been interested in metaphysical principles, you know, what they now call the law of attraction. I think when I wrote the book the first time, that term hadn't even been invented yet, or at least I didn't know about it. Well, I guess that's when The Secret came out. But when I wrote the book, which was even before The Secret came out, I didn't even know that term. When I repackaged it as E Squared, I did use that term because that's what it became known as. But no, I've always been interested in how our thoughts do create our reality. That's been something that's fascinated me from, oh, I don't know, probably forever. I grew up, you know, even in the Bible, you know, I grew up, you know, going to church and asking it as a given, you know, those kind of seeking you shall find. So I think I've been interested in this type of thing probably my entire life. And, you know, how does our mind work? How do we make the most of our lives? How do we, you know, learn to deal with, you know, our crazy minds that, can be steered in more positive directions. So yeah, it's kind of a lifelong interest of mine. So it's just pretty normal that I'd eventually write a book about it.
That's amazing. And I guess with all your principles, I have to tell you, I had moved to Paris and then came back to Vancouver, where I am right now, to renew my visa for France. All my belongings are in Paris. And as I would get on with my days, I would find your interviews and podcasts because I've heard your books. I have them on audio. I would multitask and I would be listening to you. So your voice is very much in my head. I've heard you speak so many times. So it's really fascinating. I feel like I Eastward you in front of me right now. For our viewers who don't know, let's talk about Gratitude Posse, or Comrades for Enlightenment, and the concept of AA 2.0.
Okay. Well, what I usually call my possibility posse, and I think it's important, or it's helpful, I guess I should say, if you do this with people of like mind. Because there's a lot of forces out there in the world that'll tell you, oh, that's a bunch of baloney, that's not going to work. So it's very helpful if you have people that believe like you do that this is possible, that wonderful things can happen. So anyway, I started what I call possibility policies, and you asked about the AA 2.0. As I said, when the book came out the first time, it didn't do really great. But by the second time it came out, I had been involved in what I call my possibility posse. And I'd started what I just tongue-in-cheek called AA 2.0. And the idea was that everybody knows about AA, the 12-step program. I mean, it's been around for, I don't know, is it the 30s or the 40s? It's been around a long time, and a lot of people are, use it. And I thought, well, I like smooth and easy. So I didn't develop it as this in the first time, but I've been doing it. Decided to call it AA 2.0 because it has two simple steps. And the first step is I get up in the morning and I say, something amazingly awesome is going to happen to me today. And it's just setting an intention that this is what I'm going to look for today. And this is what I'm going to ask for from the universe. I don't have specifics. I mean, every now and then I'll have an intention, like maybe I hope the interview with you goes well or something like that. But basically it's like, I trust the universe has my back and wants good things for me. So I'm going to pronounce first thing to get the day started the way I want it to, that something really awesome is going to happen to me today. And I started saying amazingly awesome, kind of as the play off on the AA. It may not be grammatically the best, but anyway, it worked. And then eventually, my daughter and I went through, and so we've got one for every letter of the alphabet, like bodaciously beautiful, something bodaciously beautiful will happen today, or something, extraordinarily epic will happen today. So I've got, all the letters of the alphabet, because after a while you might get tired of it. But anyway, that's step one, setting an intention and just pronouncing to the universe that something really cool is going to happen to me today. The second step of this little practice is I have what I call a possibility posse, and it's 5 friends, and we text each other every day blessings from the day before. And while gratitude is a practice that many people have talked about and used, our practice is a little bit different because it has to be something different every day. So I've got these 5 people that are waiting for me to announce in my little text what my 3 new blessings were from yesterday. So I feel like I'm this Lewis and Clark out there scouting the world for what are my new blessings going to be. So anyway, that is sort of the idea behind AA 2.0. And I was doing this, and I ended up writing this little blog post about it. And, in the step 1, I said, came to believe, and that's how the first step of AA came to believe that, I don't know, that my life would become unmanageable, whatever it is in Alcoholics Anonymous and the original AA. Came to believe that something amazingly awesome would happen to me. And then the second step, I think I used some wording from, the 12-step program as well. And I came to believe in, there was this force that led me. And so anyway, so when I get into this gratitude field, it's a different resonant field. You're literally living life in a whole different way. And you see things that you might not have seen before, because what I believe is the universe is always wanting to interact with us, wanting to bless us, guide us, give us signs. I mean, this is what is meant to happen. But because we live under this dominant paradigm that says that's ridiculous, everything's all rational and focus on the right side of the, or is it the left side, whichever the side of the brain, that's how our culture tells us we should be. So this is a way of, kind of superseding that and being open to this other magic that is available. And I tell you what, if I didn't already believe in this, I couldn't help but believe in it now, because since I wrote this book, I have I've got, oh my goodness, thousands, millions, maybe of emails from people that usually start with something like, "You are never going to believe this." So people send me their miracles, their stories that they've had since reading the book. And so that's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's been 6 years ago, I think, since the book came out. So that I don't get quite as many these days as I did now. I'm hearing more about some of my more recent books. But anyway, when the book first came out, it's like I almost was afraid to open my email box every morning, because I would have, so I mean, I loved hearing them, but you know what I mean? It was a big responsibility to go through all these emails. So
And I
yeah.
feel, thank you for that. And I feel now more than ever that the principles that are outlined in your books, these experiments and some of these ideas, like even though it was like planted in my brain and I didn't know where it was from, to send yourself a postcard, I was like, oh, this is where I got it. I still haven't done it. And how fantastic the idea of sending yourself a postcard, and, these little gems of self-love and self-care. Speaking of, it's really fascinating. I got your audiobook, Think and Grow Rich. And of course, I've read Napoleon Hill's, and I'm sure many other people Think and Grow Rich as well. And I was interested to see, okay, obviously, it's going to be about gratitude. And around the same time, I got your book in October. And around the same time, someone suggested to add me to a gratitude list. And the same as you, now I go through the day thinking of, what am I gonna write? Because now you said, and I think what you are saying is that when you start looking at that, it begins to expand. I want to backtrack a little bit on I have the notification as well on my phone about something amazing and awesome is gonna happen. I may not do it right away first thing in the morning, but I wanna ask you, what about some people who may not believe those words? Should they still continue to say those words even if they don't believe it, or the feeling is really important, the inner intention is really important to be connected to those words?
Well, I think the feeling is very important. But what I like to say, and I think that really explains the popularity of my book, you said, should you do it if you don't believe it? Well, I love it when skeptics try this, because that's the whole idea behind the book. I suppose it tends to appeal more to people that do already believe in this, but I know a lot of skeptics have tried it as well. Okay, all you have to lose 48 hours, try this experiment. Is it possible that you could be given a sign or a blessing? Just, suspend your disbelief for 48 hours, then you can go back to being a cynic, whatever. So I think a lot of people, once they try this, they recognize that there is some truth in what I'm saying. And the more you're open to that, and the more you believe that, the more you will find this happening. But as for if you're not feeling it, I mean, it's obviously really good if you can get into the feeling, and that makes such a big difference. But I like to say, if you have doubts about it, that's okay. I talk about the 2 magic words, it's okay. Because I think when we have a lot of resistance and a lot of anger at ourselves, that's not going to do us any good. So I encourage us to be, especially during these times of what we're going through right now, is to really just be so kind to yourself, show great mercy to yourself, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're thinking. It's all okay. So those 2 magic words, it's okay. So for people that might say, oh, that's a bunch of baloney, well, that's okay. I mean, that's fine. You can believe that if you want. I've just found that what makes me happier, what makes my life worth more to me, is when I do focus on this other possibility, on bigger possibilities, and I'm looking for the magic and the miracles. And I just find myself, okay, I've got 24 hours a day, just like everybody else does. Why not spend them in as much happiness and joy as I possibly can? People are free to feel otherwise, do otherwise if they want, but this just makes my life feel better and makes me happier. So that's why I do it. It's just a matter of choice. We don't know exactly for sure about anything. So why not pick the thing that's the most conducive to enjoying your life?
So if you can share with us and with our viewers and listeners, what are some of your morning rituals that look like, and throughout the day, how you infuse more joy into your life, and something they can do as well at home?
Well, again, starting the day with that proclamation is always a good way to start. And these are just so simple that I love that, because I think, well, oh, there's this step and that step, 7 steps. I think that was a real typical thing that a lot of self-help books, 7 steps to this. Well, who can stick with 7 steps? I mean, maybe some people can, but I love smooth and easy. So just the real simple thing of starting that pronunciation. And again, looking for the gratitude makes a big difference. But some of the things I tend to do in my ritual, again, I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, as you mentioned. So I tend to go through the Course in Miracles book every year. I start on lesson 1 with January 1st, and I do what it says to do. But basically, even the AA 2.0 program, that sort of comes from the Course in Miracles. It says, start your day with an intention. And if you don't come up with any of your own thoughts, that's the kind of day you will have. I mean, you can block that. That's the point. You could block that if you want to. But if you make that intention, as long as you don't block it, that's the kind of day you're going to have. That's a guarantee. So that also comes from Course in Miracles. But I always read my Course in Miracles. In fact, my most recent book is Course in Miracles Experiment. And what I did is I rewrote the lessons from Course in Miracles workbook. There's 3 parts of A Course in Miracles, but the meat of it, the thing that actually does all the life transformation, is the workbook, and that is the 365 lessons. And I started blogging about that in early 2018. I literally every day I'd write about whatever the lesson was. And all my people that read my blog are like, you need to turn this into a book. And I heard this again and again and again. And one of the tenets of Course in Miracles is you will have guidance. You will be guided. You will be told what to do. And it's like, how clear is that when 500 people write and tell you need to turn it into a book? It's like, okay, I guess I maybe need to turn it into a book. So I finally got the guidance, but that's sort of how it came about. And I think the thing people like about it, again, make it more fun. You want this to be sustainable. You want this to be something you can use day after day. And if it's more fun, it's more apt, you'll do it again. So I like to focus on the fun part. So I go through the Course in Miracles every day. I tend to meditate every day. So that's kind of my morning practice. Again, I think what we do first thing in the morning makes a big difference in our lives. So I think it's really important to, get our day started with a positive, a positive bent. I think it makes a big difference.
Great. I was listening to your TED Talk again, and you talk about journaling and how everyone is creative. I do here and there, I would say not so consistent with it, but I do know my definitely brain feels much more better. Julia Cameron calls it the brain drain morning pages. Talk to us about journaling and how that has helped you to write your books.
Yeah, I've been journaling for a long time, and you mentioned Julia Cameron. Yeah. She calls it morning pages, and so I've been doing morning pages. I mean, I remember she recommended three pages a day, so I usually do at least 3 pages. Sometimes I'll get into it and I'll do a whole lot more, but I put everything in my journal. One of the things I talked about in my TED Talk, and I do mention this, I have a book that came out after Thinking Rich called Art and Soul Reloaded. It's about creativity and spirituality, and it's the topic of that TED Talk. And in there, and I try to do this every day, is to write down 3 new ideas every day. And what that does is it kind of, again, just like the gratitude kind of spurs your mind to be thinking that, because your brain can be thinking about a lot of different things, but if you give it something to think about, like gratitude, to think through the blessings, then it will find those things. And if you give it like new ideas, I want new ideas. And a lot of times they are the stupidest ideas in the world. They're something I would never do. But that practice of generating ideas tends to get new things coming.
That is like an idea for a book or traveling or just something for you, any kind of ideas?
Any kind of idea. It might be take, cookies to the neighbor next door. I mean, it could be anything. And sometimes they're so preposterous. It's like, why would I ever do this? But it keeps your brain working. It keeps you thinking in terms of new ideas, in terms of possibility, like we were talking earlier. So creativity has always been a real important part of my life. And, that Art and Soul Reloaded is kind of it's 52-week. I call it an apprenticeship for people that also want to bypass that part of your brain says, you can't do this, to be creative. I do believe everyone's creative. In fact, I have a creativity test that I talk about in the book and in the TED Talk. And I say, you've heard of the LSAT for getting into law school and the MCAT for getting into medical school. Well, here's your test to see if you are creative. It has 1 question. It's PAM GROUT school or PAM GROUT's test for if you're creative. And it has 1 question, and it's, are you breathing? And it says, if you answered yes to this question, that means you are highly creative. So that, I think, is a real important thing. As human beings, we're all creative. And I think we get a lot of our happiness, I think, comes from creating, from imagining. I think it's who we are. It's what we're meant to be. And I think a lot of people, in fact, that's one thing that's kind of cool. And again, like with the pandemic, people have more time to create, although a lot of people aren't using it for that. And that's okay too. It's like, that's okay. It's like we're on what feels like a sinking ship. So, we're all doing the best we can. So if you're not writing your great American novel, that's quite okay too. But it is nice to have that time. And I think this extra time that we all have now is helping us, or is giving us, a different way of being. And it'll be interesting to see what does come out of this. It may not be anything directly from this time, but these thoughts and all this idea, we have to rest and reflect. And it sounds like for you, you were actually supposed to be in Paris now, and you just came back, and then this happened. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So,
and I would definitely say reading books like yours and listening to them, because I sometimes get ADD and I'm traveling and moving around a lot, especially when I was living in Paris. So having the audiobook, and especially when the author is narrating it, it helps a lot because you really get the intention behind every word. I've read your book, E Squared, a few times, and Think and Grow Rich actually almost 3 times. I've listened to it. And sometimes when you hear someone else give an example of their life, for someone like me, it makes it, somehow my subconscious brain says, oh, maybe this is possible for you. And I think you were speaking a lot about your traveling and how you would go to all these different places. And even before, Paris was never my dream. I was actually taking care of my mom, and she passed away. I was going to move to LA, and then I decided to move to Paris, and just believing in some of these principles that I was like, okay, like the alchemist and like in the abracadabra principle, that perhaps I will test this. If the universe is on my side, I will see if something can happen. All my belongings are still there. And, even to have you here, even to have this conversation with you, it was a weird thought that came. I was going to interview someone else who'd been on Oprah. And anyways, I decided to email you, and then you emailed back, and I'm like, this is E Squared. And I want to talk about traveling, because that is something that is really near and dear to my heart. And I grew up traveling a lot, and you travel a lot. Tell me the importance of traveling and seeing the world, and how it enriches your life, and how it changes the way you look at the world.
well, I feel so lucky that I've been able to go to so many different places, lots and lots of countries. Been to all the continents except for Antarctica. And as I say on my website, I've saved something for my 70th birthday. But I've been to, all over the place, and it just opens your eyes more to truth. And you recognize that all of us are exactly the same. We're all one. That's a real spiritual principle that any spiritual practice will say, is that we are all one. And as you travel, you really recognize that, whether in fact, I did a blog post once for Huffington Post. It was everything I need to know I learned from traveling. And it was kind of a funny thing where, again, you learn that all people are one. I'm trying to remember what were the other things that I used, but I really do feel like my mind has been opened up from traveling. I feel very blessed that I'm able to travel. And I would say that the principles that I talk about in Spirit are really why I was able to travel. I was able to believe that could be possible. Here I am, this kid from a not that wealthy family. My father was a minister. And while he loved to pack us in the station wagon and drag us around the United States, I never had gotten on an airplane or been too far until I was a little bit older. So I feel so blessed that by believing that this could be possible, I did end up getting to travel. And one of the things I talk about too is that I knew I wanted to travel, but I didn't know how to make that happen. And again, I did not have money. So I feel like I made that intention. I always say, well, how is not up to me? What is up to me? What do I want? And I knew I wanted to travel. So the how's like, how am I going to make it happen? But I didn't really worry about it. I just gave it up to the universe, gave it up to the higher force. And then I was led into travel writing. And, with travel writing, I've been able to literally go all over the place for free and stay in the nicest places and eat at the best restaurants. I mean, I've been able to do so many unbelievable things that I would never have even thought of. But because I was willing to make that intention and to believe it could be possible, to again get into that possibility state, all these things were orchestrated for me to be a travel writer. And that's been just, such a great blessing in my life to have been all the places that I've been to. And I feel really, very grateful that I've been able to do that.
I will just tell you, just you recalling that story, it really reminded me, because after reading that book and reading you talk about in E Squared, about you wanting to travel and not having the funds and just creating the vision, I think it was late one night and I started researching after reading about that. And I think at that time I also visited your website and looked at how to do press releases in exchange for like staying somewhere. I went to Uzbekistan, and I was supposed to go to Turkey before everything went down, and Cambodia and Lebanon. And it's really interesting because as human beings, when you hear someone else say that this is possible, because in the brain, in the realistic adult brain, there's this voice that says, no, you need millions of dollars. Your bank account needs to look this way, versus to hear someone else who's done it like that and to know that, listen, there's another reality that is possible for you. So thank you for planting that seed in my brain.
Oh, that's great. Now, how do you travel? Do you you write articles as well? Travel articles? Is that what you do? Or
Yeah, they're more style sort of focused, depends on the publication. I also do like Instagram stuff, and so I mix fashion and travel and going there. When I was in Uzbekistan, they had like an influencers congress. So they like invited me, but I went as a journalist because I don't have that many Instagram followers. But I was hoping to bring my cameraman and actually do a video report, but they had a full already. So I just did like some fashion mixed with travel and photos from around many different places. I was in Cambodia last year, and I was by myself, a little film, like a 4-minute clip, and lots of stories, and also an article for a magazine in New York, and mixture of like travel, culture, and that. My aim is actually to do a show that will be based on that, and I actually have a pilot that I want to pitch at McCom and sell it, not just pitch, sell it, which is about traveling all across France. So we've already done a pilot, and so it's a few other things that are on the go. But thank you for asking. I want to ask you about A Course in Miracles, and which is your latest book. Is there a particular lesson from the course that resounds with you deeply that you can share with our listeners and viewers today?
yeah, sometimes I'm asked to pick one. One just recently that I have used a lot is in my defenselessness, my safety lies. And I think a lot of times, we feel threatened. We feel like things aren't going away. So we put up our dukes and we resist and we try to defend ourselves. And when we do that, we put up a big, giant wall between us and this force. So if we really believe that the universe has our back and in the beneficence of the universe, we just need to be as open and as defenseless as possible. And that's definitely against the going paradigm. That, I've got to try really hard and I've got to protect myself and the world's a scary place. And, all those stories that we're taught. Well, we have to let go of those stories. And part of that is being defenseless. And that allows the magic to come in. So that's one I like. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. And I guess part of the reason I thought of that, just the other day, a friend of mine, somebody who's in my possibility posse, she said, oh, I was having such a hard time. Because, we can all get into the stuff around the fear with everything that's going on. And she said, oh, it was just a lifesaver to run across that lesson. Of course, then I had to go read it. And I thought, oh, that is a really good one. I have to be reminded of these things myself. But that is one I like a lot. God's will for me is perfect happiness. I mean, that is such a radical notion. I mean, what? How can you say that? Everybody knows life's not perfectly happy. But if that is God's will, that is a pretty interesting concept, and it's definitely something worth thinking about and worth shooting for. And I believe that once we get past all the things that we're defended against and all the paradigms that we believed in, we do find that happiness and we do find that joy, which is our natural state.
Which is so different from, what we learn in school or college, or what our community or the news or what we learn. I feel like for me, I've had a lot of unlearning to do when it comes to deservability of, I am worthy, I can have this, not in an egocentric way, but this is possible for me. I love the story of Kevin Costner that you talk about in the book, and how Kevin, if you want to share with the listeners the Kevin Costner story that you've mentioned.
Yeah, did I put that in Think and Grow Rich? Was that in that one?
It's in one of the books.
Which one I had that in. Yeah, that was really cool because, like anybody else, he went to high school. It's like, what is he going to do? He goes to college, not really sure what he wants to do. And I mean, this story basically goes back to, we should do what we love. But so he was majoring in accounting, wasn't really feeling it. And one day he was sitting in class, the back of the class, doing a test or listening to the professor or something. And he's like, not really listening. And he's looking through the school newspaper and he sees auditions for, and right now I can't remember what the play was, but I mean, it's like the hairs on his arms just stood up. It's like, oh my goodness, I meant to be there. He'd never done act. I mean, this was like completely out of the blue, but something told him, that force I was talking about that's always wanting to get through us and has a plan for our life, a really beautiful plan for our life. For whatever reason, because he was, zoning out of his class and he was looking, he saw it got, I'm going to be there. I'm going to go to that audition. He had no idea why, how, whatever. But so he gets in his truck and he's driving to this audition, which was set up at a certain time. And his truck, I'm trying to remember something. It ran out of power or did something into it. I don't even remember. But
he got into an accident. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, but he gets out there. He runs to the audition. He gets there, and of course, you went, oh, he got the part. That started off. He said, no, he did not get that part. But what he recognized is that he loved this so much that he would be happy to work at that. And so he started taking acting lessons, and basically it was his, the beginning of his journey. But what it was, he found the thing that it was like, Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. That was his bliss. He knew that's what he was meant to do. And if you find the thing you're meant to do that you love, it's like, it's not even like work. It's like, that's what you want to do. You want to work at that. And it doesn't even feel like work because you're doing what you want to do anyway. So yeah, thanks for reminding me of that story. I'd kind of forgotten all the details. I remember, it was a pretty interesting story, but that's how he got started. He literally let that force come through to him. And again, he, the hair on his arms just raised, like, oh my gosh, I'm meant to be there. So he was there, and it led to him to have this amazing career that he's had, winning Oscars and all kinds of things. So yeah, and I like to believe that that is available for all of us. And we do have to let go of all of our baggage and all of our beliefs and all of our paradigms, because we're taught just the opposite. When we're kids, we have imaginary friends and we know we're going to play and we just follow our curiosity. But then we're taught, no, you need to do this and you need to learn that. So we're taught not to listen to those imaginary friends or those voices, that curiosity and that play. And we're taught to follow all these rules. And as we do that more and more, this magic shuts down. So kind of what we do, I think Pablo Picasso says something like, to stay as a kid, or if adults could just learn to be as, I don't know, I can't remember exactly what the quote was, but how important it is to be childlike. And that really is, the truth, because children don't worry, oh, am I doing it right? I don't know how to write a poem. I tell the story in Art and Soul Reloaded, and I might have told this story actually in the TED Talk, I don't remember, but they did a stage play of Robert Fulghum's Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. And there's a scene where, the kindergartner teacher comes into this group of students and says, how many of you guys are painters? They all raise their hand. How many are dancers? They all raise their hand. How many are writers? They all do this. They can all do that. Of course they can. They're kids. Then they get to fourth grade, same group of students, different teacher. And she says, okay, how many of you guys are writers? A few here and there, painters, whatever, a few. By the time they're in high school, only one or two are willing to admit or that they might want to write or paint or draw, that they would have those skills. So little by little, we give up that natural sense of, I can do anything. I can play with this. I can do that. And then we start following the rules. And then we just march, along through life, following the rules and forgetting all that magic that is available. So I say, be like the little kid again as much as possible. Play, follow your curiosity, enjoy.
It's so true. It's interesting. I'll share something because I moved to Paris without speaking French, and everyone would message me and they were like, of course, bah oui, you speak French. And I was like, no, because there was just this weird sensation and some crazy idea. And I actually wrote a book as a ghostwriter, so it's not under my name. And yeah, I need to read books like E Squared and E Cube and Think and Grow Rich to know that, what my adult serious brain says, that, hey, you're of certain age, you need to act a certain way, dress a certain way, be a certain way. Because I go through that thinking all the time versus no, I can be playful. I can paint for the, I wouldn't say I'm a super crazy painter, but I just do it for fun, which I learned through Artist Way and Julia Cameron. I want to talk about writing books. What advice would you give to someone like me if they want to write their first book?
Well, it sounds like you've already got the discipline required if you've already ghost written a book for someone. That's awesome. That's really wonderful. And I applaud you too for going to Paris and not knowing French. I mean, I was just sitting here thinking, wow, I know this. I'm talking to this woman. She must know 14 languages. And particularly, I figured you must know French if you're living in Paris. So anyway, that's really brave and daring and good for you for doing that. I'm so pleased to hear that you did that. But as for writing a book, I mean, you've already got everything you need because obviously you know how to write, you've done this. I really think it's important. Okay, to me, the best books are those that are written by, I like to call them the muses. There's all these different names for this. You can call it God, the big cheese, the dude, like I call it in Art and Soul, or as I call it in E Squared, the dude. But if we connect with that bigger thing, these books will be easy for us. And like if you're feeling called to write a book, well, there's a reason for that. It's not like, oh, you just out of the blue. Something is calling you to write this book. And if you show up, see, this is the part, I always talk about everything fun, but to me, discipline is fun. You have to show up day after day after day. You have to prove to the muses that you are serious about this. And, you have to be willing to write really horribly, and you'll judge yourself at first. You go, oh, this is awful. I don't like this. But you just keep showing up. And eventually all the good stuff starts coming. And I say it's like, if you've been traveling for a long time, you turn on your water faucet when you get back home, and sometimes kind of brown junk will come out because it's been sitting there for a while. It's sort of like that, so when you start writing again, it's the discipline. You show up every day and the muses say, hey, this person's serious. I can trust this person with this story that I want to tell, with this idea that I have. So I think it's really important. Discipline is an important thing, to show up day after day after day. But again, with a playful, curious attitude, not like, oh, I've got to do this, I mean, there's a little bit of that involved, getting your butt to sit on the chair to actually do it. But again, it becomes a really fun thing. So yeah, that's the number one thing, is you want to connect with the muses, with the bigger thing, and let it be willing to be its secretary for the story. What's the book you're wanting to write?
Thank you for asking. So for me, I've done many things like having my own production company, launching my own television show, which was national on 4 networks across Canada, and doing many things, and just being a high school grad, an immigrant to Canada. And, I was at the UN last year for the climate summit, like all these things that I've done in my life without any, say, proper education, but using principles such as from Napoleon Hill, yourself, Marianne Williamson, Julia Cameron, and, so talking about some of the principles that have worked in my life. The book that I wrote, I won't talk about the title of the book, but the book that I wrote for the other person, it was literally me writing, even though I interviewed them, writing the things, like gratitude, envisioning, power of subconscious mind, and then looking at examples of other people like you who have overcome and they still keep going. In I believe in EQ, there's somewhere you say that how it was someone's quote that even though fear comes up, but you still do it. So I want to talk about like fear and then still going for it and then not having any limits to go for it by giving my own examples and other people's examples who have done these crazy things like Stallone or Schwarzenegger and even not so famous people who've done incredible things, that anything is possible, but we just need to go past. Like, I'm the only person, and I was born in Pakistan, so I'm the only person in my family who's traveled as much as I've traveled and by myself and living alone. So there's something inside of me that says that I think I have something to say writing wise. So
Oh, you definitely do. Your story sounds fascinating. I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat, like I want to hear more. I mean, that sounds really amazing. And you're just very inspiring person. So obviously you would have a good book to write. So I am looking forward to reading your book. So let me know when you got it going. But I do want to talk a story I heard just the other day, and I shared this on my blog because it inspired me a lot. Elizabeth Gilbert, are you familiar with her?
yeah.
She wrote Eat, Pray, Love. Yeah, she's another big traveler. But anyway, she had met this woman. Her name, what was that woman's name? Something Ellen. Anyway, she had been in the news. She had lost her way in Hawaii. She'd gone out to a forest reserve on Maui. It's like this huge 2,000-acre forest reserve. And she thought she was just going to go on this little walk that she normally went on. But so she left her phone, her wallet, everything in her car and just was out for this supposedly 15-minute walk. Well, she ended up getting lost in this giant reserve with all these ravines and no paths. And it was the kind of place you need a machete to get through. I mean, it was really scary there. And, on her second night there, she's like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to get through this. I'm so afraid. I mean, you can imagine being lost like that and having no phone, no contact. She was so afraid. So she finally just closed her eyes and she said to the universe, to God, to whoever, she said, please take my fear away. When I open my eyes, I want this fear to be gone. Well, sure enough, she opened her eyes and the fear was gone. And in its place, and this is why I love this story so much, there was this voice that came to her very clearly, and it told her, turn left, not right. Eat this mushroom, not that mushroom. It literally gave her very clear guidance on what she needed to do. And I was sharing that story the other day with one of my possibility posses, and they said, well, why didn't the voice tell her how to get back to her car? Because I think she was out there for 17 days. And I thought it was really interesting because sometimes the universe has a plan for us that's bigger. Yeah, that would be the easy way. Just like now with this coronavirus thing, everybody, we want it to go back to normal, but maybe we need our 17 days in the wilderness. There could be something bigger going on. And I love that. But once the fear was gone, this other voice was very clear to us. Just like your voice that wants to write this book sounds like it's pretty clear, but what ends up coming out sometimes for us is like, oh no, I'll do it tomorrow. You know what I mean? Procrastination, all those things. But once we let go of fear, that's just fear. That's just disguised as fear. So once we let go of that, this other voice will come through. And I just love that story because that's what Courts and Miracles is all about. Everything's either love or fear. I mean, that's it. So once the fear is gone and asking for the fear to be gone, I mean, that was a really cool thing. She knew she wasn't going to make it if she had to live with that fear. So she asked for it to be gone. And sure enough, it was gone. And then, the voice came in and all, everything worked out perfectly, beautifully. And that's what I do believe is our inheritance if we're willing to claim that and let go of the fear.
Thank you for sharing that. That's quite amazing. I just wanted to share that I love how in all your books, but especially this one, because I have the hard copy here, there's positive quotations from, many different people. I love that. And I actually copied that not those exact quotations when I was ghostwriting, and all the people thought that was really, really cool. So I just wanted to share that with you. I want to ask you, how, if you ever, and how do you deal with the negative voices, for example, that may, do you ever deal with envy or jealousy or compare and despair? Like that is something, in my world, I have had to work through and I'm still working through. And only recently, like what you were mentioning, Elizabeth's story, only recently I started just saying, okay, higher power, like take this from me. Like I can't even be like, I'm giving this to you because I don't know how much of that I have, but like I worked as an actress, working in television and, all the pressures of looking a certain way, short hair, long hair, tall skin, all the things. Like, how do you deal with that? Especially when you're writing books and especially maybe a thought, does it ever come up that says, oh, there's so many amazing writers out there. There's so many da-da-da, but year after year, you keep writing. So my question is like, how do you deal with these little critters that come inside?
Well, everybody has them. In fact, one of the things in Art and Soul Reloaded, each of the 52 weeks that talks about this apprenticeship, I tell a story from a very famous person about some of their doubts. Every person has them. Oprah Winfrey. I mean, name a person who you would say is the pinnacle of success. Steven Spielberg. I've got quotes in there. In fact, one of the funniest ones, Abraham Lincoln, he's this president. I guess when he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, he was like, is it good enough? I mean, even he had those voices of doubt. So I guess what I'm trying to say is everybody has it. That is so common. That is just the way everybody has it. But so we just have to do it anyway. And so part of the reason I do the daily practice, why I get up every day, I do my A 2.0, I do my Course in Miracles, is because it helps me deal with those voices a little bit better. They're still there. I mean, I still have voices of doubt. I mean, I think it's just the human condition. I think there are people that wake up like Eckhart Tolle or somebody like that, just wakes up and no longer has those voices of what the Course would call the ego, but those voices that tell us we're not good enough, we're not worthy. But you're in good company. In fact, that's what they call that section. But you're in good company because everybody feels that way. Everybody. Like Maya Angelou, she said every time she'd start a new book, and I can identify with this so much. Those same little voices would say, "Oh, I pulled one over on him last time. Am I going to be able to do it again?" So I guess that's somewhat comforting to know that whatever fear you might have or whatever doubt you might have, you're in good company because we all feel that way. And as for how I personally deal with it is by these practices. I mean, if I didn't do these practices, I would probably never get out of bed in the morning. I just pull the covers up over my head and just stay there. So I think spiritual practices and focusing on the now, focusing on focusing on what you want to have happen instead of what you don't want to have happen is very powerful.
Okay, just the last few questions. We're almost out of time. If you could time travel back to when you were 15, what would you say to young Pam?
Wow. uh, I've got this little thing on my bumper or on my dashboard that a friend of mine gave me. It says, everything's always working out for me. So I guess whatever fears I might have had back then is knowing that, everything's going to work out. There's that line from the Marigold Hotel or whatever that show was, where the guy said, well, if things haven't worked out yet, it's not the end. So that everything will eventually work out. So that's kind of a little bit of encouragement to keep 15-year-old Pam going. It's hard for me to remember what 15-year-old Pam was thinking, but I was already writing then and already, dreaming bigger dreams and staying in Kansas, which is where I grew up, and wanting to see the bigger parts of the world. So, yeah.
Is there a particular city or country that's really left a mark on your heart?
As a travel writer, I get that question a lot, like, what's your favorite country? And I usually give one of two answers. One is that just like you don't want pizza every meal, you know what I mean? It kind of depends on what mood you're in. You mentioned Turkey, that you were thinking about going to Turkey. I love Turkey so much because of the people. Oftentimes it's the people. In fact, I think one of the things, everything I need to know I learned from traveling, I told you that story did. I think one of the things I learned, it's the people. It's not the places, it's the beautiful people, and connecting them is the most important thing. And now I've even forgotten what the question was.
Any city or country that you love to
Yeah.
visit?
So I don't, have a particular favorite place. The other answer I'll often give is the place I last was. I'll remember that very fondly, and I love that place. So I'll often give that. Obviously, I haven't been traveling now for a little while, but yeah. So a lot of places that I love very, very much. How about you? What's your favorite place as a fellow traveler?
Um, I was really amazed by Uzbekistan. I would say it was not something, it was not a place that was really on my map. And then when the invite came to visit, I was blown away. And there was a particular city, Kiva. It's a walled city, so no one's driving in there, and it's centuries old. There's something really special about places like that, and the people are so warm. And I also love Bali. I mean, I went there after Eat, Pray, Love, but I actually went there to study yoga in a little village, and the people, how content, happy, and joyous they were from inside out, and the sparkle in their eyes, their smile, they don't want anything from you. I felt they had something I didn't have at that time. And, that's why I always go back to Bali, because there's this purity inside. But like you said, it's the people. It's the people that make the place special.
Mhm.
Any last nuggets of wisdom for our listeners and viewers right now, how they can, going back to the first question again, but how they can bring more joy into their daily lives, disconnect. We're not saying to totally not accept reality, but at the same time, how they can bring more joy into their life, raise their vibration, and increase their happiness.
Last nuggets. Well, I don't know, but what would my biggest nugget? But I guess I wrote about this in the new book, is that because people do ask me that, what is your nugget of wisdom? And I would say maybe to be suspicious of the voices in your head. Those voices that tell you that you're not worthy, those voices that tell you that it's going to be too hard. So to be suspicious, because when you think about a voice that tells you you're not worth something, why would you listen to that voice? So I guess just to be suspicious of that voice in your head, and to know that there is a bigger reality. Again, it goes back to that. So those voices in your head, they're just imposters. They're not real. They're just, something crazy you made up, and don't give them so much heed.
Well, thank you so much, Pam, for taking the time. It's been a delight. It's been an absolute delight for me to speak to you, to see you, and talk to and hear your voice all at the same time, because I've been hearing it in audiobooks and interviews and podcasts from a long time. If you have not read Pam's books, please consider purchasing E-Square. You can visit her website, or Think and Grow Rich, or E-Cube, as well as many of her other. She has 20 books in total. You can visit Pam's website. It's pamgrout.com. We'll put all the social media information there afterwards. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you so much, Pam Grout.
Thank you.
So I will stop.